Human behavior and pollution can have a devastating impact on the environment. Take the example of the endangerment and extinction of the keystone species. Keystone species are important organisms like bees, gray wolves, elephants, and coral reefs, all organisms whose existence is crucial to the stability of their ecosystems. When we endanger or drive keystone species extinct, we create an imbalance that can have far reaching consequences. But there are solutions. We can reintroduce keystone species into habitats where their numbers have declined. We can minimize human caused damage on their habitats through nature preserves and laws. And we can find other organisms to fill the niches of regionally extinct animals. However, some propose a more controversial solution, replacing nature with technology. In fact, it's happening already. Researchers at West Virginia University have successfully pollinated crops of tomatoes and blackberries with a bee mimicking drone. And we need efforts like these to help support our struggling ecosystems as we solve the underlying problems. But this approach continues global biases, where habitats are better supported by governments that can actually afford that tech, which, of course, is almost certain to be proprietary. So, what happens when technology replacing nature spirals out of control? The North Pacific sea otter is my favorite keystone species, whose fate and the fate of the kelp forests that they live in hang in the balance of collapse, due to 2 centuries of hunting for fur trading. You see, the sea otter is the main predator of a voracious kelp grazer, the purple sea urchin. And as the sea otter's populations were decimated, the purple sea urchin population exploded. In the absence of predators, purple sea urchins mowed down kelp forests on the west coast, wiping out the homes of thousands of other species and wreaking havoc on biodiversity in those areas. Today, the endangered sea otters are threatened by oil spills, disease, and ocean warming as humans continually burn through fossil fuels. But what happens if we get hooked on replacing nature with tech? And what if rather than trying to improve the issues that we created, we instead replace the animals that we drove to extinction with genetic hybrids? This sea otter serves as a reminder that we're better off working with nature instead of trying to replace it. I chose the sea otter for its ridiculous cuteness and for being a historical example of a victim of human endangerment, specifically through the fur trade. To make the sea otter, I started ideating and sketching, and I landed on an illustration of a sea otter in my traditional Fleshimal stylization. It's a version of an animal species that is a genetic hybrid made out of human fingers. I then reworked the 2D illustration into a 3D design using Blender, Nomad Sculpt, Rhino, and Mesh Mixer. Different 3D modeling programs have different strengths and weaknesses, and each played an important role in finalizing the model. Next up, I 3D printed small prototypes, which are handy for gauging interest in a piece and understanding what improvements need to be made. Certain my design worked, I moved on to the large scale piece, built to be 2/3 of the actual size of the sea otter, giving it uncanny realism and high levels of detail. You can see the otter for yourself when it's on display at the CU Museum of Natural History in the summer of 2023. Until then, lend sea otters and other keystone species a hand. Reduce your waste to help minimize pollution in waterways. Support Monterey Bay Aquarium in its efforts to restore sea otter populations. And remember, it is our responsibility to protect the keystone species that keep our planet healthy and balanced by working with nature, and to change our actions to protect the environment instead of changing the environment to protect ourselves.